Teal dear. Why don't you just die? Just go away so I don't have to do this anymore. Just give up! 8 videos. 8 videos over 2 years covering this nonsense, and yet it's still going. With a history this long and the number of people who have joined us since this saga began, I think this warrants an origin story. Unfortunately, owing to all of the shit going on in Hollywood at the moment, the origin story movie budget has been reduced to 0. So instead of an all-star cast prancing around in front of a green screen for several hours, and then a massively overworked and underpaid special effects crew picking up all of the slack, I'm gonna do this using MS Paint, a lot of caffeine, and absolutely 0 punctuation. Let's go. In the beginning, Boehringer Ingelheim created an antidepressant drug as a means of treating and capitalizing on the ever-growing numbers of first-world problems in the world. Unfortunately, it was absolutely terrible, so they completely scrapped the project. Several years later, a company called Sprout Pharmaceuticals comes along and purchases the drug. Instead of doing their own research and improvements on the drug, instead what they decided to do was to market it as a female libido drug, a condition for which it was absolutely completely ineffective. However, that didn't dissuade feminists and women's rights organizations from leaping all over the drug, calling this the grand sexual equalizer and constantly comparing it to Viagra, even though the two drugs have absolutely 0 similarities whatsoever. Sprout Pharmaceuticals astroturfed the ever-loving shit out of things, paying to create organizations such as Even the Score, which combined with feminist and women's rights organizations pressured the FDA to get this thing on the market by calling them sexist if they didn't. Along comes Valiant Pharmaceuticals, a company embroiled in massive amounts of scandal, which offers to purchase this drug which doesn't actually do anything to the tune of $1 billion off of Sprout Pharmaceuticals. The overall plan being that the revenue generated by Addyi will dig Valiant Pharmaceuticals out of some very deep and very expensive legal holes. Valiant Pharmaceuticals got greedy and massively hiked the price of Addyi, resulting in cries that Valiant Pharmaceuticals was sexist and that their mishandling of the drug was the only reason that it failed to get into the market, because it couldn't possibly have anything to do with the fact that in testing, Addyi would only produce 0 to 1 more satisfying sexual experience per month to women who are taking the drug, and also most of the research done on the drug being done in men, because men are very well known to suffer from female sexual dysfunction, while simultaneously forcing them to completely abstain from alcohol, owing to the fact that combining the two would cause most people to black out, while also rendering the contraceptive pill ineffective, a combination of effects that couldn't possibly have any negative implications whatsoever. After this latest scandal involving Addyi, Sprout Pharmaceuticals began taking legal action against Valiant for mishandling their terrible product, and joining the bandwagon of people asserting that the only reason this drug failed was not because of its ineffectiveness, but because of how Valiant Pharmaceuticals mishandled it. In the medical world, Addyi was now thoroughly discredited, to the point where it's now become a medical case study in how not to do things. And a lot of the feminist and women's rights organizations now have egg all over their face for supporting this product, and having to publish statements that the only reason they backed this thing was because of the astroturfing campaign done by Sprout Pharmaceuticals and their marketing attack dogs over at Even the Score. And then having to go even further to admit that they didn't actually bother to read any of the research on the product, and all of their support was entirely ideological. Meanwhile, Sprout Pharmaceuticals CEO Cindy Whitehead took her money and ran, creating a new incubator project called The Pink Ceiling, a project which is supposed to help financially back organizations claiming to be manufacturing products for women's benefit, which in reality sounds more like a crash course in how to scam people the way she did with Addyi. Finally, in a last-ditch attempt to actually make some money off this product, Valiant Pharmaceuticals created a bare-bones website called Find My Spark, an initiative that was basically nothing more than an online sexual health quiz, and then a prompt that you should go ask your doctor to give you Addyi no matter what your results were. And that brings us up to the current day and what I'm going to talk about now. Whew, I think that's pretty much everything out of the way. So what's been happening with Addyi lately? Well, turns out since it was such a massive failure for Valiant Pharmaceuticals, they are now giving the drug back to Sprout Pharmaceuticals. The way that Valiant is trying to play this off is of course typical business jargon. We're streamlining our portfolio. Gotta shift those paradigms. Make some actionable, dynamic plans. It's all just one giant smiley-faced sticker put over the giant hole where their company's financial worth used to be. Now, the reason that I consider this topic worth covering today is because in the last video we noticed that Valiant Pharmaceuticals was attempting to break Addyi into the Canadian market. But now that Valiant is returning Addyi to Sprout Pharmaceuticals, along with a cool $25 million to help fund the initial operating expenses, which I can only assume means that Addyi is now going to have all of those posters and pamphlets that it was supposed to have, and that as a result of it finally getting those, I guess it's now going to explode and we're going to see it absolutely everywhere. Valiant, in exchange for this, seems to think that they're going to get 6% of the royalties on global sales of Addyi 18 months after the signing of this deal. They really are still holding on to the hope that this thing is going to dig them out of all of those legal black holes that they've found themselves in, and I've got some really bad news for them. It's not going to work. Still, it'll be very interesting to see how Sprout's shareholders take this change, given the fact that some of them are currently suing Valiant Pharmaceuticals for mishandling this drug. I've got to wonder how they're going to take it when, under the guidance of Sprout Pharmaceuticals, it still fails colossally. The thing that boggles my mind is the number of people who are still willing to support this drug, who still genuinely seem to believe that it is the best thing ever, and is absolutely something worth financially backing. The writing is on the wall. We have all of the evidence that we need. Addyi is ineffective, and it is dangerous. And yet some people are still holding on to it. It's an interesting case study, I think, into either extreme feminist ideology, just the absolute power of, we're doing this for equality, and how that narrative can just blind some people completely to the reality that's actually around them. Or it may very well just be a textbook case of the sunk cost fallacy. You've gone this far, what happens if you just go a little bit further? You've invested all of this time and money, so you know you're due for a massive payout soon. My real concern with this drug going back to Sprout Pharmaceuticals is that we've noticed that Sprout in the past has had absolutely no problems with paying organizations to support their products and help push it to market. So I have to wonder if we're going to see a recurrence of that event happening in the next few months. Just some random women's rights organization popping up out of nowhere, leading the charge, dragging behind it a load of other feminist organizations who didn't read any of the research, complaining that if women don't get this thing and if this thing fails on the market, it's because the entire world is sexist and hates women. Because let's be honest, that's pretty much been the entire marketing angle on this product since day one. And since Addyi seems like it's about to push its way into the Canadian market, I can see that tactic being highly effective. Thanks, Trudeau. You're a real hero. Honestly, I'm amazed that this drug is still going. But for now, let's just wait and see what the next move is, because you know that this white whale is going to do something stupid eventually.